Travis.
Okay.
Tornadoes? Hurricanes?
No, we actually, everywhere we went, they said you brought good weather with you.
Oh, good.
It rained in Memphis where we took off from.
Right.
But everywhere else was sunny, and it was really lovely weather. So, yeah.
It could rain anytime,
Exactly.
especially in the south.
Right. Well, when we had from Los Angeles, we had a stop in Dallas Fort Worth, and there was weather there, and there were birds. Were the birds flying in Dallas that stopped plane travel from Houston to Dallas? They had birds that get caught in plane engines. We were delayed 4 hours, I think, because of weather and because of those birds. So
Weather and bird delay.
right.
Well, that plane that Sullenberger had to land on the river, that was hitting birds.
Well, it was interesting that it was there were a flock. I mean, flocks, I guess, that really they knew in advance that planes didn't take off then. So it was interesting.
Headed through Dallas rather than the 40.
Others are coming on. That's it so far. So that would be our minion. Count them for our minion.
Oh, there's one more in the room.
Yeah.
We're saved.
Yeah, we've got some kind of.
We got
more people.
two more. As opposed to an invitation.
A virtual compared to a real. Yeah. Hey.
We needed you.
We only needed one of them.
We're holding our breath. I'm like, oh, you're here.
That makes 11 in the room. We don't have to count anybody on the screen. Yeah. We have a minion.
Judy planned on picking up Harvey being here, so.
Okay.
I'll sit you.
Did you hear about was she 93-year-old woman who, with her grandson, visited every national park in the country? It took like 5 years.
Wow.
60. There are 60 national parks in the United States, and she's the oldest person to have done that. And she got a certificate.
Good.
Oh, they gave her a certificate.
Yeah.
You give her a T-shirt? Oh my God.
Every single part.
Right.
And it's I went to every party. All I got was a certificate.
We'll give it one more minute for the bus to pull up.
And she did different activities in each of the parks.
Yeah.
She had what's that?
Zip lines.
Zip lining.
Oh,
They showed her zip lining. Somebody else was right there with her, but she zip lined and
Rolling downhill.
Yes, in the beach area, she was rolling.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Okay, let us start. If you have not yet put on your talit and will be doing so, please rise. We will say the bracha together, but always we'll put on the talit. If you want a talit and you didn't bring one, we have them available if anybody would like. So let's say the bracha together. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher
Kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu v'ta'ateh b'tzitzit.
Be seated, and we begin on page 14. The bottom of the page, letter E. Yisrafu Hashamayim, Yisrafu Hashamayim, Yisrafu Hashamayim, Yitagem Yeram Hayam, Yeram Hayam, Yeram Hayam, oh, Yeram Hayam, Yeram Hayam, Yeram Hayam, Oshia, Alecha, Zareh, Nachadecha, Rain, 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 Menase Marava, Oshia, Alecha, Zareh, Nachadecha, rain, 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 Menase Marava. Surely on my Shabbat, surely on my Shabbat, surely on my Shabbat, surely on my Shabbat, is more share. Surely on my Shabbat, is more share. Surely on my Shabbat.
Tzaddik Katamar
Here is my Lord, 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 here is my Lord. Adir Bamarom, Adonai, la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 We are at the bottom of page 15. Hallelujah, Tzil Tzalei Shama. Hallelujah, Hallelujah, Tzil Tzalei Trua. Kol Hashama, Hallelujah, Hallelujah, Hallelujah. Kol Hashama, Hallelujah, Hallelujah. Please rise. La 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 la. La 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 la. La 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 Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMevorach. Please be seated. We are on page 16. להודות לך ולייחדך באהבה ברוך אתה אדוני בוחר בעמו ישראל באהבה ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודך והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבבך ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ולכתך בדרך ובשכבך ובקומך ובשעתם להיות על ידך והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך. The Lord said to Moses, speak to the children of Israel and begin to make tzitzit in the corners of their garments throughout their generations, putting upon the tzitzit of each corner a thread of blue. When you look upon the tzitzit, you will be reminded of all the commandments of the Lord and obey them. You will not be led astray by the inclination of your heart or by the attraction of your eyes. Thus will you be reminded to fulfill all my commandments and be consecrated to your God. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt to be your God. I am the Lord and your God. Azot, azot, Shiva, Venatanu yedidi, venatanu yedidi, Zmirot shirot v'tishbachot, v'erachot v'hodachot, L'melech el-chai v'kayam, Ram v'nisa, Gadol v'nora, Mashpil gedim, U'magbiel shefali, Motzi asirim v'ode'anav v'yozergalim, v'yodem le'am, v'yodem le'am, v'yeshavam elam. Tehillah le'el Elyon Baruch Mevorach v'nei Yisrael Chadashira b'simcha rabba v'yamru chulam Mi kamocha elim Adonai Mi kamocha nedar b'kodesh Norah tehilot oseh Shira Charashashi B'chu Gerulim L'Shimcha Svat Hayam Yachad Kulam Hodu V'Himlichu V'Yamaru. Let's pause to express our thankfulness. This is anniversary Shabbat, and I see that Pat and Jerry Michelson are celebrating their anniversary this month. Is there anybody in the room who is celebrating an anniversary this month? Okay, let's open it up then to anybody who would like to share what you are thankful for. Yes, fine.
Well, Thursday was Shayna and Aaron's 9th wedding anniversary.
Happy anniversary, Shane and Aaron. They often live stream. Who else would like to share what you are thankful for? Judy.
Well, even though I had to get off of this drug because of side effects, it really improved the state of my bones. So I'm thankful to science for creating a product, even if I can't take it anymore.
Very nice, thank you. Who else would like to share what you are thankful for? Marty.
I'm thankful for finding out how many wonderful people there are in the world. In my situation, I can do certain things and I can't do certain things, but all of a sudden people pop up to help and to offer ways to get around my situation. People like Judy and the guy that picks me up every Monday morning to go to Wings Over Wendy's, and everybody else is just, it's unbelievable that I'm able to do the things I am because of them. So that's really something to be thankful for.
Nice, thank you. Who else would like to share what you are thankful for? Okay, Stan.
Wow, I have too much time.
Oh, wait, let me think of something.
And repeat everything twice.
Am I going to be talking to?
No, we can hear you.
Okay.
They can see you.
You can see me. Well, that's even more important. Of course, 2 weeks ago at this same time, maybe a few minutes later because the service went a little bit longer, but 2 weeks ago, I was in Israel, and you saw me on that screen. I went with a group from the Tikva Fund and Rabbi Meir Soloveitchik, who I've studied with on the internet for 3 years now, and has become one of my very esteemed teachers, among other things. So I got the chance to go with him and 30 people from the Tikva Fund that paid to go, and another 10 or 15 that were part of the group that organized it and took care of it and spoke. And so it was wonderful. I can't be more thrilled that I went and was able to do it, or more happy to have survived the time that I was there. That was very stressful, but more than worth it. More than worth it. So I want to talk a little bit about Rabbi Soloveitchik and what we did, and also about the fact that Phyllis and I and Lou Loomis has been doing what Rabbi Soloveitchik entitled Jerusalem 365, which is a 1 year or so long podcast series, 6 days a week, except for Shabbat and holidays, and talking about the history of Jerusalem in particular, and of course Israel extended, from the biblical times to modern times. And at this point, we're up in the series to 1948-49, the formation of the state. And of course, yesterday was Yom Yerushalayim, which was a certainly significant aspect of what he's been talking about. And there were two podcasts in the last couple of days that I thought were absolutely significant, and I wanted to share at least the essence of what it was. And So, of course, in 1948, 1947, the United Nations passed the resolution. 1948, the British left, and essentially the United Nations left too, because they were supposed to help enforce the resolution and never did. So it became a war. The Declaration of Independence, was spoken and declared the intention of the state of Israel to welcome all religions and to be a part of the member of nations that, of course, the Arab nations around wouldn't accept. So there did become a war. And in 1948 through beginning 1949, there was a truce here and then. Uh, but there was a lot of casualties on both sides. But in particular, we're more remembering of the Jews who fought for the state of Israel and were remembered on Yom HaZikaron, which they started celebrating that year. And then again on, there was no Jerusalem Day, of course, but there were many, many deaths and even civilian populations in Judea and Samaria were just slaughtered by the Jordanians and the Egyptians, but mainly in the north part it was the Jordanians. So there were many deaths. And during the truce in 1949, the head rabbi of the IDF, Shlomo Goren, who was tasked with recovering the bodies of those that had fallen and moving them to Israel to burial. And it was actually a dangerous mission because there were still Jordanian troops in that area, but they were able to recover the bodies. There was like 40 some from one the Gush Etzion uh, establishment there, and the rest. And so they recovered the bodies, but they didn't have any place set aside by then to bury them. Uh, but Rabbi Goren decided that the appropriate place would be on Mount Herzl, where Herzl, of course, himself was already buried, but there was no actual cemetery per se. But he made it into the Israel's first military cemetery and had the bodies set aside to be buried in a public funeral. And so there were 60,000 people at the funeral that in that year, and of course there was still fighting going on around them, but everybody came, and uh, the funeral, no, the military uh, cemetery was established. It's now the largest one, and where all the more, not only the ones who died in service, but many of the uh, presidents and prime ministers and important people are buried there. I've had the privilege of on at least two Yom HaZikarons to go there for the public ceremony that they have, and it's more than uh, more than moving. It's and we're taught in our tradition, in our religion, to remember Zakor. Uh, and of course, there's a day of remembrance, but every day is really a day of remembrance to me to be thankful for the blessings that we all have of being able to go to the state of Israel the many things. And so it's wonderful that I'm back here with you and that I was there with them. But since I have a minute or two more, I want to pass around. This is something that was gave many of us were given, or the people that were given about what we were going to do that day in the form of a postcard with a picture on it. I have a bunch of them, but I wanted to. So the other person besides Rabbi Soloveitchik that I admire and talked about on various occasions is David Suissa and the Jewish Journal. So I have a minute. I didn't read the whole thing. I just got it. But David Suissa's column is called The Torah of Pleasure. So there's more than one way of looking at Torah in our tradition. And so he's talking about, he said, I've never heard a rabbi give a sermon on pleasure. I'm sure it's happened. I haven't come across any sermons, but hundreds of rabbinic lectures I've attended and thousands of spiritual essays I've read usually deal with weightier matters, such as ethics, values, tradition, and so forth. But he is talking then, he said, he goes for all that, but he said there's more to Torah than that. And so he says, which brings me to my addictions to curb your enthusiasm. Has anyone watched that at all? Okay, it's an HBO thing, so I guess so he says, the show is pure guilty pleasure. There's not one crumb of pretense that its obsession with the trivial and mundane will add any meaning to my life, make me a better person, or help me repair the world. It requires zero exertion on my part, except to sit back and enjoy it. But he's talking about this, that anything that we can do that just gives us pleasure is also Torah. So I had the chance to meet David Suissa at a couple of occasions and talk to him briefly. Of course, he's here in Los Angeles. But I've had even more occasions now that I went to Israel to talk to Rabbi Soloveitchik. So, who can tell? Thank you.
Thank you, Stan. Don't forget the book written by the rabbi called Kosher Sex. So if you want to pursue that whole line of pleasure, then you can do it there as well. Let us all rise as we prepare for the Amidah. Tzur Yisrael, Kuba Yisrael, Yisrael, Tzedei Chinumeha, Yehuda Yisrael, Aleinu Adonai Tzvaot Shemo, Kedosh Yisrael, we continue quietly with the prayers within and not the prayers in the prayer book. Sim, 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 shalom, sim, 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 shalom, sim, 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 shalom, tova uveracha. Sim, 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 shalom, sim, 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 shalom, sim, sim, shalom, tova uveracha. La 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 la. La 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 la. La 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 la.
Shalom, sim, 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 shalom, sim, 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 shalom, tova uveracha.
Say shalom, 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 Nimromah, say shalom, Aleinu, oh say shalom, 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 Nimromah, say shalom, Aleinu, Yaakov, Israel, V'yimeru, Amen. Please be seated. Yitkadam, Yitkadash Mirabah, Yomari Bachibuti, Yomachmachudi B'chayech, Yomechon B'chayech, Beit Yisrael, Ba'agal Avizman Kari Yimeru, Amen. Yeheshmei Rabba Mevorach, Leolam, Leom, Leomaya, Baruch Vishtabati Kapar, V'tamami V'sei V'yitadar, V'alivit Halal Shemei D'Kudishah, Le'ilam In Kobechata V'shrata, Tush B'chata V'nechamata, Da'amiran B'yom V'yimeru, Amen. Those Lord Hanabad Hodcha Yisrael, Kadam Avon B'Shmaya V'yimeru, Amen. B'Shlam Rabba Mitchamaya, V'Malinu B'Al Yisrael V'yimeru, Amen. Say Shalom Dimromav, V'Yaseh Shalom, Malinu B'Al Yisrael V'yimeru, Amen. We've come to the Torah service on the middle of page 19. Let's give out some honors. Louis, your turn. Good.
Thank you.
Who would like the honor of Hagbah?
My turn.
And it's Mo's turn. And who would like the honor of Galila to bind the Torah? Paula, thank you. We continue then on page 19. Ein kamocha Adonai, the ein kamosecha, malchutecha malchut kol olamim, mimshaltecha bechol dor v'dor. Adonai melech, Adonai malach, Adonai yimloch le'olam va'ed. Adonai moyitein, Adonai yivarech et hamo b'shalom. Avar rachamim, eitiv v'zalcha et Zion. Tivnei chomot Yerushalayim, Tivnei chomot Yerushalayim. Kivlecha levad batachnu, melech Aaron v'Nisan, Adonai. Vayivin Aaron vayomer Moshe, Kuma Adonai, v'yavusu oivecha, v'yanusu misanecha, mipanecha, ki mitzion tetzei Torah, ki mitzion tetzei Torah. Yerushalayim, Baruch Shenatan Torah Torah, Baruch Shenatan Torah Torah, Le'amo Yisrael, B'kedushato, Be'be'an arachetz, Elish Kadisha, Kadisha Yakira, Amar Tush Bechai, Be'an arachetz, Elish Kadisha, Kadisha Yakira, Amar Tush Bechai, Ye'eravakadama, Letita baby b'oraita, letashlim v'shalim delibi, beliba d'choma Yisrael, לטוב ולחיים ולשלום. אמן.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai
Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Kadosh Shemo.
Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonai, Kadosh Shemo.
L'romama Shemo Yachtav.
Adonai Hagidula veHagidura veHatiferet veHaneshach veHahod Hiko b'shamayim u'ba'aretz Hiko b'shamayim u'ba'aretz Adonai hamamlacha ve'hamid na'aseh lechol eretz Letzion Tetzei Torah, Letzion Tetzei Torah, Kim Letzion, Kim Letzion, Kim Letzion Tetzei Torah, Letzion Tetzei Torah, Letzion Tetzei Torah, Kim Letzion, Kim Letzion. We remain standing for the reading of the Torah. The Torah hasn't been rolled yet because Bonnie knows exactly where the Torah portion begins, because there's a big space right before it, but I can help her find it. It's right there. So, good job. So we remain standing for our Aliyah, but just a quick note about what we're about to read. So obviously the 5 books of Moses include the first book of Bereshit, where we have the creation story and the early patriarchs and matriarchs. But then with Shmot, Exodus, we had the period of enslavement and liberation. And then by Yikra, we had the laws of the Levites, the Levitical family. And then we have now in the portion that we begin this Shabbat, Bamidbar, which is in the wilderness or Numbers, we have the beginning of the journey through the wilderness for the 38 years. And we're going to have a few of those years that are going to be outlined in the Torah portion over the next few weeks. And it's going to include a great deal of whining, a great deal of complaining. The Israelites are never going to be happy. And then the next time we come to the end of the wanderings, which is at the end of the book of Bamidbar, and when we get to Devarim during the summer, that is going to be after the 38 years of wandering, some additional laws, and then eventually entering into the promised land. So you can see from this big space here, we are beginning then the 4th book of the Torah, Bamidbar. And let us all have our communal aliyah by pointing right here with your pinky or your talit and kiss, and we join together. Baruch Adonai Haborah, Baruch Adonai Haborah Le'olam Va'ed, Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, Asher bacharanu mikol amim, v'na'ata lanu et Torato, Baruch Atah Adonai Noten HaTorah.
וידבר אדוני אל משה במדבר סיני באוהל מועד באחד בחודש השני בשנה השנית לצאתם מארץ מצרים לאמור שאו את ראש כל עדת בני ישראל למשפחותם לבית אבותם במספר שמו כל זכר לגולגולותם מבין 20 שנה ומעלה כל יצא צבא בישראל תפקוד אותם לצבאותם אתה ואהרון איתכם יהיו איש איש למטה איש Rosh Levet Avotavu.
Again. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torah emet, v'chayei olam natan b'tocheinu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah. Yeshua. Lovely. Please be seated. And I'm going to give each of you an excerpt of the Torah portion. So if you could please take one and pass it down. And if you could take one and pass it down. Thank you. Today is the 44th day of the counting of the Omer. And you know that according to the Torah, we count 49 days. And when we get to the 49th day, we know that the next day is a holiday of Shavuot. And what that originally was, according to the Torah, was an agricultural festival. You bring in the barley harvest. But because there was no historical event associated with the holiday of Shavuot, the rabbis layer on top of it that it is also to mark the giving of the Ten Commandments, which I thought was quite timely because these very same Ten Commandments are going to be displayed on school classrooms throughout Texas. According to a new law that has just been passed in Texas, and I've got the law here, it tells us that there must be a display of the Ten Commandments. A public elementary or secondary school shall display in a conspicuous place in each classroom of the school a durable poster or framed copy of the Ten Commandments, that it must be big enough that it is legible to a person with average vision from anywhere in the classroom in which the poster or framed copy is displayed. It must be at least 16 inches by 20 inches, and it must include the following words. And it's got portions of the Ten Commandments. I am the Lord thy God. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. So it's got excerpts of the so-called Ten Commandments, and of course it's going to use the Queen's English. It's going to use the King James translation, the mistranslation with the thous and the these, and it's going to include not the same translation that I gave you. And what I find particularly interesting is that the Ten Commandments, and by the way, it has been passed by the Senate of the of Texas, and it's now going to head to the state. It's heading into the state's House of Representatives. It passed by a 17 to 12 vote, and it was authored by Senator Phil King, a Republican, and he said it must be in a conspicuous place, and it is important that everybody see those Ten Commandments. And what I've always been intrigued by is, what are people going to see when they see the Ten Commandments? And you know that there are other Republicans who want it posted in every courthouse in the land. It hasn't gone to the Supreme Court yet, this whole Texas law, and it probably eventually will end up in the Supreme Court, whether or not you can mandate the display of the Ten Commandments in classrooms. And until that makes its way through there, every single elementary, secondary school in Texas is going to have the Ten Commandments. And what I've been intrigued by is that I don't understand what people are going to see when they see the Ten Commandments. What sense are they going to make of them? Obviously, the Torah was meant to be a book to stand on its own. And yet, it's impossible to understand the Torah if you just read the literal Torah. In the Jews, remember, it's our book. It's not the Christians' book, it's our book. And we never felt that the Torah was something that could be taken at just its surface level, the pshat. It had to go into further levels of understanding because a lot of the laws are ambiguous, a lot of them are not clear, and just like the Gideon Bible that is found in so many hotel rooms, and just as there are so many other people who just casually read or maybe even seriously read the Bible, whether it's on Big Brother. You know that the TV series Big Brother, the only book that they can bring with them into the Big Brother house is a Bible. You find a lot of prisoners reading them in jails. And the question is, what are they getting out of it? I have spent my life reading the Bible, and most of it I don't understand. Most of it is not very clear as to where it's going, what the laws meant, what the context was, what the proper translation or interpretation should be. And I have spent a lifetime trying to understand them. And I especially have been trying to understand the Ten Commandments, because we come upon them 3 different times in the course of the Torah reading cycle and the holiday cycle. So we're going to read it on Shavuot this coming week. We are going to read it also when we get to the Torah portion called V'yat Hanan, when the Torah is described in the book of Devarim and also in the book of Yitro, where it is first introduced when the Israelites first received the Ten Commandments. So I want you to join with me in this task, to look at, with the mind of a kid in most cases, who doesn't really know the Bible very well, coming from his own milieu, which could be an observant home, a Jewish home, a secular home. And he's looking at these 10 commandments that are required by the state that he read them and see them. What is he then supposed to do with them? Is he supposed to internalize them? Is he supposed to become a better person by reading them? So I want you to look at these 10 commandments, and we're going to quickly go through them, and we're going to figure out if we didn't study the 10 commandments, and I've studied the 10 commandments with you for the last 45 years, so hopefully some of the stuff that we've been studying together will come to mind. But what I did was I tried to use artificial intelligence, AI. And I went on to ChatGPT, and I asked this question: how could somebody, like a teenager, reading the 10 Commandments on the wall in their classroom, how could they misunderstand the 10 Commandments so that actually it could be harmful to just look at them and without any interpretation or any commentary or any discussion, try to figure out what they're supposed to do with it? So I asked that question, and if you're not familiar with ChatGPT, it's fascinating. You want to really, it's free. It's worth going on there and just asking it questions. So I want to share with you the answers that ChatGPT gave me as to how somebody can erroneously read the 10 Commandments, sometimes to the detriment of that interpretation. So look at the first commandment. And again, this is not the King James translation. This is another translation. I'm the Lord your God. Now, if you were sitting in a room looking at that, what are you supposed to do with that? What would you do with the commandment that says, I'm the Lord your God? And if you're trying to figure it out, how could it be hurting you and affecting you to see something like that? Now, obviously, if you don't believe in God, or you come from a family of secular people or people who are atheists or agnostics, and then suddenly you see in the classroom wall, you're supposed to read this commandment that says, I'm the Lord your God, and not just, the commandment's longer than that, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage, just says, I'm the Lord your God. What are we supposed to do with that? What's the commandment? Well, this is what ChatGPT says could be a problem. This commandment may be misinterpreted to mean that individuals should not respect or acknowledge other religions or belief systems, leading to religious intolerance and discrimination. The second commandment: you shall not make for yourself an idol. Now, obviously, the words are actually a graven image. So you can imagine you're in elementary school, right? You're a 4th grader. What is a graven image? Or an idol. You're from an observant Christian background that you go to church every Sunday and you're bowing down to idols all over the church. Or there's one hanging in front of you at the front of the church. What are we supposed to do if you are an observant Christian with a commandment that says you should not have graven images? This is what ChatGPT says is a problem with that. Some might mistakenly interpret this commandment as a blanket prohibition on any form of artistic expression or appreciation, limiting creativity and cultural diversity. By the way, the rabbis struggled with this as well. What is this idol? What is this graven image? They finally decided it's any three-dimensional object that you pray to. So without that interpretation, you could end up with this completely different understanding as to what the commandment means. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. Well, we know what kids are going to understand that to mean. You can't say, oh, God damn it. But that's not what it means. That's not the way the rabbis ever understood his meaning. By the way, this isn't even a good translation. The better translation is that you shall not take an oath misusing God's name. Right? You've heard both translations. You can't take God's name in vain, or you can't swear falsely using God's name. The intent, the rabbi said, was oath-taking. You can't swear to something using God's name and lie about it. But this is the way that it could be misinterpreted. This commandment can be misconstrued as a prohibition against any form of criticism or questioning of religious beliefs, stifling free speech and intellectual inquiry. How about remember the Sabbath and keep it holy? They're talking about the Shabbat. What is supposed to, if you're not Jewish, what's the point of that commandment? It's not to create a Sunday. It's to create a Shabbat. That the Torah goes on to explain exactly what that Shabbat is all about. So this is the way in which it could be misconstrued. Some may interpret this commandment as an endorsement of strict observance of specific rituals or practices on a particular day, potentially imposing unnecessary burdens on individuals and disregarding the importance of rest and leisure. Now this is an interesting one, the fifth commandment. Now this is interesting because according to what has to go on the walls, it's the full honor thy father and thy mother, that thy days may be long upon the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee. Do you see a problem with honor your father and your mother? What would you say? Let me just throw it out to you. You're a kid looking at that commandment. You're supposed to, I guess, do that. Is there a problem with a commandment that says honor your father and your mother? Yeah, how about if you're an abused child? And that's telling you, you got to love your parents no matter what they do to you. Strike you or abuse you. And
or because you got to love them and honor them or you're going to die.
Yeah. Well, so this is the way ChatGPT understood this. While honoring parents is generally important, a misinterpretation of this commandment might suggest blind obedience and subservience to parental authority, disregarding the well-being and autonomy of individuals, particularly in cases of abuse or harmful parental influence. You shall not. Now, they got the mistranslation here because what is going to end up on the walls of all these Texas schools is you shall not kill. And that's not what the commandment says. You're allowed to kill. You can kill in self-defense. You can kill in the time of warfare. Capital punishment is a form of killing. You're not allowed to murder. But that translation is so important, it's going to be the wrong translation on all of these walls. But what are the problems with this? This commandment can be misapplied to justify acts of violence or discrimination against certain groups, such as individuals with different beliefs, races, or sexual orientations.
But it's okay to own a gun.
Especially in Texas, yeah. You shall not commit adultery.
What does that mean?
Yeah, so...
Fourth graders.
You'll know when you become an adult.
Right. Well, this is the way in which ChatGPT says that there's a problem. While this commandment emphasizes fidelity in relationships, a narrow interpretation might lead to victim blaming or shaming of individuals involved in consensual, non-monogamous relationships. You shall not steal. Well, that seems to be pretty straightforward, and that's an important commandment, and I guess most people are not going to misunderstand what that means, but this is the way in which it might be misunderstood. A rigid interpretation of this commandment might dismiss the importance of addressing systemic issues of economic inequality, or deny the legitimacy of civil disobedience movements aimed at social justice. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. This commandment can be erroneously used to discourage whistleblowing or speaking out against injustice, enabling the cover-up of wrongdoings and perpetuating harm. And finally, you shall not covet anything that belongs to your neighbor. Well, obviously, this is the only commandment that governs thought, not just action. You can imagine that somebody who wants something, which the rabbi said is something that you could have gotten yourself legally, but you schemed and plotted to get it in a way that becomes the violation of the commandment. But you can imagine that's the interpretation. You can imagine seeing you shouldn't desire something, and here is almost everybody in the world who wants something that they're not going to be able to get, and feeling very, very guilty about this. Here is the way in which this could be misinterpreted. This commandment, when taken to an extreme, may discourage ambition or aspiration, stifling personal growth and innovation. It could also be used to justify the hoarding of resources rather than promoting social justice and equitable distribution. These are books that are all about the Ten Commandments. Here's a book. It's called The Ten Commandments. It was written in part, by the way, by Rabbi Stuart Vogel. Here's a book all about the Ten Commandments. A lot of the books in this library are all about just those 10 commandments and all the different rabbinic interpretations. Because we need to study. We can't just use the surface shot understanding of the Bible. Luke.
Okay, so I have a question. I'm glad you did that. Chat GPT, a lot of controversy behind it, but I'm glad you asked that question. Did you ask the follow-up question, which is the opposite? How can these enhance our lives, or the good part? What did Jack say?
Okay, so here's what Chat said.
And who's going to teach these kids?
I'm a plant.
Okay, so for the first one, you shall have, Chat didn't even comment on, you shall have no, I am the Lord your God, but it starts with, you shall have no other gods before me. Teenagers can learn, so I specifically asked, what can teenagers learn from these 10 commandments? Teenagers can learn the importance of prioritizing their values and beliefs. This commandment encourages them to establish a strong sense of identity and make choices aligned with their core principles. You shall not make yourself an idol. Teenagers can learn to avoid getting caught up in superficial pursuits or idolizing celebrities or material possessions. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. Teenagers can learn to use language respectfully and avoid disrespecting religious or spiritual beliefs. Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. Teenagers can learn the importance of balance and self-care. This commandment reminds them to dedicate time to rest, reflection, rejuvenation, fostering mental and emotional well-being. Honor your father and your mother. Teenagers can learn to appreciate and respect their parents or guardians. This commandment encourages them to recognize the sacrifices made for their well-being and develop healthy relationships based on love, communication, and gratitude. You shall not murder. Teenagers can learn the value of respecting life and resolving conflicts peacefully. You shall not commit adultery. Teenagers can learn the significance of fidelity and the importance of building trust in relationships. The commandment encourages them to prioritize honesty, integrity, and commitment in their romantic interactions. You shall not steal. You should respect other people's property and rights. And you shall not bear false witness. Teenagers can learn the value of honesty and integrity in their words and actions. And finally, you shall not covet. Teenagers can learn the dangers of comparison and the importance of gratitude. So that's not to say that we can't learn something about them, but this isn't on the wall. All these positive things, nor are the negative things on the wall either. Just those words are on the wall. And I think that as Jews, it behooves us to understand that any part of the Torah has to be taken with an understanding of how the rabbis interpreted it. And so this book, if you don't already have this, is, at least for the Torah, the best book that you can get. Because the Eitz Chaim is our Chumash. This is our book, and part of the conservative movement is an outgrowth of the conservative movement. And it's got all the rabbinic commentaries on every sentence in the Torah and every haftarah that is used as well. And these commentaries also include how today they can be interpreted and used not just how the rabbis of old interpreted it, but how we have a completely new gleaming message that these laws can provide for us as well. So don't just pick up a Bible and think that you can get the full essence of it. Pick up a book like this and learn actually what is not just written on the wall, but is much deeper than that. Mike.
How's that compared to the Sonsino Chumash that a lot of us screw up with?
The Hertz Chumash. That's the one that a lot of people grew up in. The blue Hertz Chumash. A lot of interpretation has happened over the last 40, 50 years. And a lot of that now is reflected in the Yetz Chaim. So when you go to a conservative congregation, this is usually what you find now if they can afford it for everybody. And it's in English that is a little bit more understandable and commentaries that are much more relevant. So study the Torah as we approach Shavuot, study the Ten Commandments, but also find a good teacher and not just a book. And find something that's deeper than that 11 by 20 inch placard that's going to end up on those walls. Let us now do a Misha Berach for those who are not well. Misha Berach, Habaytein, Abraham, Isaac, Yaakov, Motenu, Sarkal, Chavalea, who Yivarech for a better Cholim. He who blessed our ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah. Bless and heal these who are not well. Please raise your hand. I'm calling.
Rita Barafi, Mike Roach, Angie Testa, Carol Burke, Cindy Marks, and Robert Tuck.
Yaakov Berish, Ben Shoshana, Moshe Shmuel, Ben Shoshana, Raquel Masha, Bat Shoshana, Anya Bafega Reva, Shana Malka, Bat Sarah, Shoshana Avital, Bat Pesha, Et.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you.
Phyllis, who ended up with an upset stomach after dinner last night, and that's why she's not here, but sends her warmest regards. And Steve Schuster, and that's fine.
If you remember other names, we'll come back at least.
Mike Lancidel and Israel Winter.
Thank you.
Elise Pistol and Joel Golden.
Thank you.
Sheila, Phyllis, Jay, Lou, Michelle, Jessica.
Beth Brown, Eileen Wasserman, Debbie Rath, and Mitchell.
Nadav Sella, Jane Absent, Linda and Bob Sharp, Bonnie Ritter, Fran Winters, Linda Rohrman, Nancy Arkin, Nina Hersher, Barbara Garaboff.
Thank you.
Charlie Matlin, Ruth Solomon, Sue Hillman, Shelley D, Diane Lee, Steve Schuster.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to add Paula and add Simmons Schuster and Chuck Richard Simmons coping with all this. So.
Joan Easley, Marcia Megan, Melvin Brody, I think I said Fran Kabulnik, and that's it.
Thank you. Ray.
Fran Kabulnik, Simmons Schuster, Steve Schuster, Suzanne Mattioy, Janetta Wazana, Phil Cooperman.
Thank you. Sam?
Mark Suckman, Sherry Blank, and Fran.
Thank you. And I'll have one more and then I'll call it in. My grandson, Eitan, came home from Israel a couple of weeks ago. I give him piano lessons every week, and he came over to my house a few days after he came back from his trip to Israel with his class. And we played the piano, and then afterwards I said, "So how was your trip and how are you feeling?" He said, "Well, my arm's been hurting, but I think I kind of strained a muscle. But Mom's going to take me to the doctor. We're going to have him take a look at it." They went to the doctor, they took an x-ray, it was broken.
Oh my gosh.
So he had a broken arm that he got in Israel in the first few days, and it just kind of hurt a little bit, and he played the piano with that broken arm, but he's now healing. So we'll include his name as well.
Rebecca Farber.
Thank you. Any other names we've neglected? Harvey.
Eric Downs.
Thank you. Any other names? HaKadosh Baruch Hu yishlach lehem b'mhira refuat ha'nefesh v'refuat ha'guf v'tosach v'yudaner v'yudamer. Amen. May the All-Merciful restore these people to full health and to full vigor, along with all others who are stricken with illness, and let us say, Amen. We're going to say a blessing for the United States. Harachaman ha'yivrach arzot habrit. Yagin aleha, may God bless the United States of America, protect her from the debt crisis that is currently plaguing. That's not really what it said. Yeah, exactly. That's a rabbinic interpretation from an vote of the rabbi. And before we do this about Israel, thank you to Stan. A century-old movie starring Charlie Chaplin has helped researchers at Bar-Ilan University to study the neural substrate of humor using a new tool. Up until now, they've been using a functional magnetic resonance imaging, or fMRI, that shows something about how the temporal lobe processes the humor stimuli. But as much as humor plays a part in our world, they found that there was a way in which they could actually do a better job of figuring out exactly what happens to the brain when you are exposed to something that is humorous. And with this study, the team, in order to test to see whether or not they were able to better understand how the brain processes humor, they asked patients to watch a 3-minute excerpt from Charlie Chaplin's Circus from 1928, while their brain activity was measured in real time. Beforehand, the amusing nature or not of each sequence had been evaluated frame by frame by a group of healthy volunteers. Please rise as...
I would volunteer for that.
Yeah.
Makes me laugh.
Please rise as we have the husband Galila come forward and we say a prayer for the state of Israel. Israel v'go'alo, Barechet Medinat Yisrael, Reishis Michat Yehulatei, Zot HaTorah Asher Sam Moshe Lifnei Bnei Yisrael Al Pi Adonai V'yad Moshe Yisrael Ve'oraita Chadu Yisrael Ve'oraita Chadu Torah Hallelujah Torah Hallelujah Torah, hallelujah. Torah, hallelujah. Ayim lamazima, v'tocheha merusha, deracheha. Darchei Noam, Lechol Netivotecha, Shalom. Hashivenu Adonai, Elecha Benashua, Kadesh Yameinu, we may stand for Aleinu, page 24. Aleinu l'shabeach l'Adorato, Atekilah v'yosef Reshit, Shelo asanu kirei haratzot, V'lo samanu k'mishpachat ha'adamah, Shelo samnu keinu kahem, V'gor aleinu k'chol ha'olam, V'anachnu korim u'mishtachvim u'mudim Lifnei melech malchei hamachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu Zerudu teshamayim v'yosei haaretz U'Moshe yikaro ha'shamayim bima'al U'shkinatu zah V'gavei meramim U'Eloheinu reinu Makinu Efesulato, Kakatu Betorato, Yadata Yom Leashirota, Elevalecha, Ki Adonai Hu Elohim, Bashamayim Mimaha, V'ya'aretz, V'ya'aretz, Mitachar, Eyo, Eyo. Ne'emar, V'ya'adonai, L'melech al kol haaretz, V'yom ahu, Yeh Adonai echad, U'shemo, U'shemo, U'shemo echad. Please be seated. However, if you are in mourning or observing yurtzeit, remain standing for the mourner's Kaddish as we observe these yurtzeits in the coming week. Zichronam Livracha, Joe Hockmeyer, Nathan Davidson, Alan Friedman, Philip Rader, Sam Zatz, Helen K. Finley, Harold Weiscott, Sarah Lamke, Milton Stover, Marshall Gordon, Louis Ruggie Miller, and Madeline Allen. And we mark the passing of Sima Schuster's brother and Fiona Taylor's brother, who both passed away this last week. Is there any yurtzeit that we have neglected? Please raise your hand. When his Kaddish is on page 25. Yitgadal v'yitgadash shemei Rabbah, v'yamad yivrachi rutei v'yamlich malchutei, v'chayechon u'yomechon u'v'chayenecho Beit Yisrael, ba'agala u'vizman kari v'yemiru, Amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah me'orach le'olam u'le'omei olayim. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. V'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei dekudesha b'richu la'elam min kol birchata v'shirata tush birchata v'nechemata da'amiran v'yama v'yiveru amen. Yehei shulama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimeru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimeru amen. Please be seated as we call Jordan to share some of the congregational announcements.
Let me rest for a second. Disneyland yesterday. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. That's a good start.
Yes, yes. Are we tishing or are we all done tishing?
Well done.
Okay, no tish. You missed it, and it's your fault. Our next Shabbat service will be June 3rd at 10:30 a.m. On Sunday, June 11th, we will have a special program with Rabbi Feinstein. Israel 75 years old or new at 2 p.m. in Rita's room and via Zoom and live stream. And that's it. Shabbat. Oh, you have some?
Well, just to acknowledge that the Jewish World Watch walk was, our team walked and raised the money that
we did. We raised the money. And not a single genocidal act was performed during the walk.
That you know of.
At least in Los Angeles.
Well, I'm just saying in Los Angeles. Yeah. I'm not talking about Texas.
No.
Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you, Jordan. And I want to remind you that Shavuot does begin this coming Thursday night. Yes. Thursday night there will be a Tikkun Leil Shavuot, the study session that begins at 8 o'clock at Temple Ramat Zion, where I will be speaking. Our congregation was invited. A lot of you, I think, got the invitation. And we're going to have lots of food, and there also will be several study sessions, about 30 minutes each, So those of you who have participated in the past, I think you would agree that it's very, it's nice camaraderie, and it's also nice studying together. So that will be this coming Thursday night. Service is also Friday morning. Saturday morning is Yisker, remember? And so find a congregation or go online where a congregation will be able to provide you with the Yisker Memorial Service. Any questions about Shavuot? Okay, let's join together in the singing of Adon Olam, page 26. Adon Olam, Asher Malach, B'derech Kol, Yitzini Ra, Yei Nasa, V'Efshar Kol, Azai Melech Shemo Yikra, V'Acharei Yikron HaKol, Again. I think it just goes on the wall. This is rad. No one would have picked it up.
Yeah, it's good. Final
Sam, how are you? I hope he's praying.
So, Shabbat Shalom.
Shalom. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for tuning in. Have a wonderful weekend.
Also, thank you. Bye-bye.